Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan and welcome to Words in Time. Now in today's video, I'm going to be talking about hard and soft sci-fi. I'm going to be going over what exactly those terms mean, what are some of the different aspects between them, give you some examples and recommendations, and let you know which I like more. So let's get into it. So how I like to think about the difference between hard and soft sci-fi is the degree to which the story relies on science. And when I say science, I mean proven science or theoretically possible science, at least given our current understanding. So does this mean that hard and soft sci-fi tell completely different type of stories? Well, I'd argue that they can either tell different types of stories, or they can tell similar types of stories in different ways. I'd also argue that hard and soft sci-fi isn't necessarily an either-or, but rather a sliding scale, and I'll expand on both of those points later in the video. Now, I've also heard that the difference is that hard sci-fi puts the emphasis on the science in science fiction, and soft sci-fi puts the emphasis on fiction in science fiction. Now, I generally agree with this, but I don't want to make hard sci-fi sound like a science textbook. It does still include fiction that is comprised of made-up technology, characters, stories, and settings. So now that we've broadly defined hard and soft sci-fi, let's break down some of the specific aspects and differences between each of them. So number one, we have plot. In hard sci-fi, the plot is going to be driven by a scientific concept or technology. So for example, if we have an artificially intelligent character, and their actions, the story, the relationships are all driven and informed by that scientific concept, then that story might be considered hard sci-fi. Whereas in soft sci-fi, we can also have an AI character, but if the story and the plot are perhaps driven by something else, such as a mystery or romance or something other than that specific science or technology, then it might be considered softer sci-fi. Number two, scientific explanations. In hard sci-fi, the science used is generally accompanied with explanations. For example, you might have a spaceship with a nuclear propulsion energy that expels reaction mass and produces thrust. Whereas in soft sci-fi, you can also have a spaceship, but you just hit the overdrive button and off you go. The science doesn't need detailed explanations in softer sci-fi. Number three, the type of science. Another difference I've heard between the two is that hard sci-fi focuses on natural sciences, such as maths, physics, biology, whereas softer sci-fi focuses on social sciences, such as psychology, politics, and sociology. Now, while I think this is generally the case, I'll push back on this just a little, because I think that soft sci-fi still needs at least some form of natural science, because social science on its own isn't going to be enough to distinguish the book as sci-fi. It's not going to be able to separate itself from other genres such as classic or contemporary literature. Number four, fantastical elements. Hard sci-fi is less likely to include fantastical elements, and anything that seems out of the ordinary is usually going to be explained by science. Soft sci-fi may include fantastical elements that are not explained by science. However, the lines between these two can be blurred. As Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And number five, reading difficulty. If you don't have much of an interest in learning why a technology or how a technology works, then harder sci-fi might be a bit of a tougher read for you. However, overall, I think that the difficulty of reading is going to come down to the writing style more so than the subject matter. For example, The Shadow of the Torturer is a somewhat confusing read, and I consider that to be softer sci-fi. Whereas The Martian is a fun and fast-paced read that I think a lot of people can enjoy, and I would actually consider that to be quite hard sci-fi. So I mentioned earlier that not every sci-fi book is either hard or soft sci-fi. Just as you can order a steak anywhere from rare to well done, a sci-fi book can be written from soft to hard. So starting with soft, an example would be Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. In it, a man, Charlie, with a very low IQ undergoes an experimental surgery to increase his intelligence after the surgery was successfully performed on a mouse. However, when that mouse starts to regress, the question becomes, will the same happen to Charlie? So this book starts with a scientific idea, but from there the focus is definitely much more on relationships and people. Moving on to medium soft, an example would be Ubik by Philip K. Dick. In this story, in the near future, corporations undergo acts of corporate espionage against each other using psychics and anti-psychics. And when a security team is ambushed, a man is killed and rushed and put into half-life, a form of cryonic sleep that will preserve his consciousness. And the rest of the team that survives starts to experience strange shifts in reality. So this book definitely includes some cool scientific concepts and technology, but it definitely has a mysterious and fantastical feel to it as well. Right in the middle, we have medium, an example of which would be Hyperion by Dan Simmons. In Hyperion, we follow 7 pilgrims that are traveling to the planet of Hyperion to visit the Time Tombs, which are traveling backwards through time and are guarded by the Shrike. Now, in this book, we have some pretty heavy sci-fi themes and concepts, like time dilation, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology. However, Dan Simmons does play a little fast and loose with these concepts, and not everything has a scientific explanation. Moving on to medium hard, the example I chose was Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. Now, in the year 2130, astronomers detect a large interstellar object, which they name Rama. And upon closer inspection, it looks to be cylindrical in shape. So if it doesn't appear to be natural, does that mean it's an alien spaceship? Now, the focus of the book is definitely Rama itself and the physics and the atmosphere inside it. Clarke uses science to form imagery and create mystery. Lastly, we have hard, and for this I chose Dragon's Egg by Robert L. Forward. Now, in this book, there is a neutron star with a surface gravity that is 67 billion times that of Earth. And on it, there is a plant-like species that evolves and is known as the Chela. Now, the human astronomers discover this neutron star while this species is evolving, and they set out on an expedition to explore it. So, Robert L. Forward was an actual physicist, and that definitely comes across while reading this book. While there are characters and a story, the majority of this book is technical descriptions of the environment of the neutron star and the biology of the Chela. If you don't believe how hard this is, it does come with diagrams. So, which is better between hard and soft sci-fi? Ultimately, I think asking that question is a little bit like asking whether you prefer hard or soft tacos. It comes down to personal taste. For me, I love both hard and soft sci-fi. I've given 5 stars to books all along that scale. I think it's more a matter of execution than it is of style. However, if you're going to force me to choose, I'm gonna lean towards harder sci-fi. I really like that kind of medium to medium hard sci-fi. And the reason for that is that I think that harder sci-fi gives me something that I don't get from any other genre. I love reading about new technologies and those big sci-fi concepts. For me, there's nothing better than escaping into a book that asks the question, what if? So those are my thoughts on the genre. Let me know which of the two you read and what are some of your favorite either soft or hard sci-fi books. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and you can find more sci-fi content over here.